All right, welcome. Welcome all. We're so happy you are here with us for the second Washington Safe Routes to School Network webinar on traffic gardens specific to Washington State. We have a fantastic group of speakers presenting on their Washington State examples. Ed Ewing and Steve Durrant will talk about their White Center permanent traffic garden, and then Carrie Wilhelme with the city of Tacoma will walk through a temporary traffic gardens, and Carrie Wilson and Karen Steen will talk about pop-up traffic garden event that they hosted in Olympia. And we won't have breakout discussion groups today, but we will have a full discussion. So if you can pop your questions into the question box, you should see a question box, not a chat box. Then we will go through Q&A at the end of these three presentations. So I'm going, as Charlotte is going to pass it over to Steve and Ed, and I would love to introduce our first speakers, and we're grateful for Charlotte and WashDOT for hosting us today. So Ed is, whoop, pardon me, there we go. Ed is the executive director for BikeWorks. He was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and developed a love for cycling through family bike trips and riding to work with his dad. He has a passion for racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, and has developed and implemented successful equity-focused programs, initiatives that present community-minded solutions. In 2007, Ed co-founded and directed the Major Taylor Project, a year-round youth development cycling initiative focused on creating access and opportunities for Black and Brown youth in diverse and underserved communities. Ed believes in meeting challenges with an innovative and authentic visionary approach to inspire team members and community partners. He believes in strong community partnerships, building and promoting positive, authentic relationships, and leading with a collective voice. Steve Durrant is a landscape architect and principal at Alta Planning and Design with more than 40 years of experience in non-motorized transportation solutions, helping communities become better places to live. His recent work in Seattle, Tacoma, Portland, Minneapolis, St. Louis, where we're not, Steve, and other cities, includes planning and design for regional open space systems, non-motorized transportation corridors, light rail, streetcar transit, urban waterfront redevelopment, and bicycle transportation programs and facilities. He is an accredited League of American Bicyclist cycling instructor and a former member of the League's board of directors. He currently serves on the board of Peace Peloton, a nonprofit advocating for economic reform for Black people. Steve was inspired by bicycle playgrounds in Denmark and Finland and brought his League cycling instructor experience to designing the traffic gardens in White Center and at Cascades headquarters at Magnuson Park. Take it away, Ed and Steve.
Thank you, Kaylin. Appreciate that introduction, and it's great to be here. I wanted to share a little bit about the White Center traffic garden that's in Dick Thurnell Park, and it was a rather organic experience for, I think, all parties involved: Cascade Bicycle Club, King County Parks and Rec, and Alta, and a number of other community-based organizations. But the genesis of the project came about where King County Parks and Rec approached me at the time when I was leading the Major Taylor Project at Cascade Bicycle Club. And King County Parks approached us and said, in kind of the spirit of their equity and social justice initiative at Parks and Rec throughout King County, how can the organization help facilitate more growth and more infrastructure and just more programmatic aspects of the Major Taylor Project in South King County? And so this was part of their youth sports facilities grant. And so they came to Cascade with funding in an effort to expand our efforts in South King County. And it really was a very pivotal moment for the organization at that time, to really understand and to really take the time to think, where can we best leverage these funds? There was some talk to leverage this grant funding at Cascade's headquarters at that time, which was in Magnuson Park. But we really had an authentic conversation as far as we're committed to work in the diverse communities of Seattle and Tacoma, and we should focus these efforts and our efforts and these funds where they're going to have the greatest impact. And so we had a conversation as far as, well, the proximity of Cascade, where it is right now in the Sandpoint community, the amount of funding that that community could generate for a traffic garden of this type probably would be better served in the North End. And so by focusing these funds in the White Center or in South Seattle, we would have the greatest impact. So we made the decision to focus the grant funding in White Center, where Major Taylor had been active at that time for 10 plus years. And before we even got to the point of engaging community, we really had to understand, would the White Center community be interested in a traffic garden? And so because we had been in White Center for 10 plus years with Major Taylor, we had developed relationships with community leaders like Pat Thompson of the Yes Foundation, or Celie Sabusa, who at the time was the executive director of the White Center Community Development Association. We had developed relationships with the schools there, Evergreen High School, Cascade Middle School, and 3 or 4 other elementary schools. So we knew the right people to ask this question. And the first thing we wanted to do was to better understand what are the community goals of White Center. And we found out that a couple of their goals was, one of their goals was building strong, healthy families. And we felt that we also had understood and learned that the community had been using other facilities like basketball courts or tennis courts to teach young kids how to ride bikes, and also to teach adults how to ride bikes as well. So there was definitely a need that we discovered in White Center for a traffic garden type of structure. Then we had another conversation with King County Parks and Rec to figure out, okay, what kind of infrastructure that King County Parks and Rec have existing in White Center. And we discovered that there was a not very well used tennis court that had been sitting pretty much idle in the middle of a Frisbee golf course. And so we engaged the Frisbee golf course community. We also engaged the adjacent high school and middle school to really discover the usage of this tennis court. We discovered that the usage was very, very low. So we really kind of had this perfect canvas to really dream with what we wanted to put in the White Center community. And again, it was very much driven and led by the White Center community itself. It had to fit, it had to have a purpose in the community. We had to put our goals and our motivations aside, and to really listen and to engage the community authentically through a series of community engagement meetings to really understand the community's needs and to really make sure that this was the right thing that the community wanted, rather than a well-intended nonprofit going into the White Center community and telling the community what we wanted. And I think one of the best pieces of advice that I received during that process was from Celie Sabusa, who is the executive director of the White Center Development Association, Community Development Association. She said, "Ed, be prepared for us to tell you how to spend your money in our community." And for me, that was the lightning bolt of we're engaging the community authentically, we're engaging the community the right way. The community should be leading this process, and the community should also have a stake and ownership of this process. So once we had agreement there, we were able to move forward, but we weren't able to move forward unless we had that agreement. So it was a huge learning for us as an organization regarding community engagement, especially community engagement in communities of color. So once we had the agreement, and once we had the location, we were able to engage Alta, and Steve and I had already been talking about this type of opportunity. We had already had a couple meetings as far as where other places of the community a traffic garden would be beneficial. And so we partnered with Alta to do the planning, and Steve can kind of walk us through the next steps.
Thanks, Ed. And I'm going to take us through just a real quick outline of how I got to there and what happened with it, and a couple of important lessons learned that I hope people will think about. Two examples that really struck me. One was in Copenhagen and another in northern Finland in a place called Oulu. That these are aerial, Google images that I just copied the other day, so you can, and I'll give you the address for where you can go look at those. You can see their extensive street networks. And on the ground, there are really fabulous resources. There are literal roadway setups with lots of different situations that you would commonly and sometimes uncommonly encounter on a road, and became a learning experience for kids. In Oulu, and here's a URL that you could copy down if you want, and it'll come up again a little bit later if you don't get it all down. The last 5 letters there are the important ones for finding it. It's pretty fascinating. We were just really impressed with all of the facilities and the situations covered in that traffic garden. And you can see it's pretty complete. It's got signs and striping and the whole bit, and the whole kind of landscape involved there. In Copenhagen, which was one that I had found earlier, it's just a fabulous facility. Both of these we visited in the winter, so there weren't many kids there, and there weren't any classes on the weekend days that we were there, but they're really heavily used facilities. And you can see they even have operating signals, both auto and bike signals, in the one in Copenhagen. One thing that was pretty interesting in Copenhagen is they have traffic gardens integrated into some of their neighborhood parks. So they're not just dedicated educational spaces exclusively for traffic learning. They've got them integrated into city parks and even into apartment courtyards in a kind of informal way. So the first one that I worked on with Cascade was right at their headquarters building. And this was interesting because it's a very narrow space. We talked about doing it in the front of the building and ended up in the back in this narrow alley. It's actually 16 feet wide, and we could go practically as long as we wanted, but kind of a grim space for starters. And you can see here, this is how a lot of learning opportunities for cycling are conducted. And they're in a parking lot or some disused bit of pavement, and people put out cones or tennis balls cut in half and say, imagine kids that this is a street network, and the kids go, no, that's a parking lot with cones and tennis balls in it. So what we really wanted to do was create a space that was purposefully thought out to, in coordination with the curriculum of the league cycling instructor curriculum. So there are tick marks that at 10 feet apart that you can put cones on for the slalom. There are railroad tracks that we showed painted on the scene. There are destinations painted. Hey kids, go up to the yellow dot and wait there. Look out for the crosswalks and that sort of thing. This, in a narrow space, we set up as street art more than as a literal street system. In White Center, as Ed mentioned, we started out with an obsolete tennis court. They had actually replaced the tennis program nearby with a brand new tennis center. So this was very lightly used, if at all. And this is what we ended up with. It's 106 feet about on a side, and we figured out many different opportunities for learning in this space. And in this one, I set it up with destinations. Kids, go over to the dark red dot and wait there. Go around the orange dot and keep going and stop at the purple dot and that kind of thing. So we could really, it's really set up for as an educational experience with many different situations involved for use. On opening day and each of the days that I've gone back to visit, there have been kids there and parents there every time I've visited at random times during the week. And on opening day, there were kids that were out for the very first time on a bicycle, and they knew exactly what to do, which was pretty cool to watch how they were using it. And then Cascade also has educational programs, not just Major Taylor, but other educational programs that they run. And by having their dedicated space, they could work out their curriculum. And this is how it started out. Here's another situation where I set it up with the numbers. Kids go line up at the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, kind of a countdown system. You can't see it, but way in the back, there's some red dashes suggesting that, which is a boundary. Basically, kids don't go beyond the red dashes, sort of thing. But this is what it looked like after 5 years. And so my first lesson learned is don't skimp on materials and installation. It looks like crap. And so I'm a big advocate for you know, really spending the money to do good materials and good installation. This was opening day at White Center, and this is about the same week as I took the photo at headquarters. So after 4 or 5 years, it really just made a huge difference to have good materials there. And then remember, this is where we started and what the example was from Finland and from Copenhagen. And here's what we built in White Center. So there's lots of opportunity to do interesting things at many different scales. Here's a quick rundown of approximately what the costs were. And you can see that the rehab and the surfacing is an really important factor. And of course, it depends on how big the space is because it's a per square foot. The furnishings, I think, were pretty important to have in White Center. And you know, each time I visited there, parents are hanging out at the picnic tables, and sometimes there are bikes locked up at the, you know, the bike racks and that sort of thing. But the shipping container storage is you know, something that you can do, but don't really have to do. And so here are the lessons learned. You can rehab and you can even share the use of an existing surface. Really high quality sports surface is important. Furnishings are a possibility, and I think benefit the overall thing. Having the storage for your program if you've got an earn a bike or other kind of programming, and then actually programming the space so that it gets used. And here are a few resources that would be useful to take a look. There's a pretty good outline that I put together for the traffic garden that has a couple of videos in it that are pretty cool. There's information on the League Cycling Instructor Program and the Google Map coordinates for the 3 parks that I looked at. And there's contact info for Ed and myself. And that's it for me, Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Ed and Steve. Ed, it's phenomenal to hear about the groundwork you laid with the White Center Neighborhood Development Association and how necessary that is. And Steve, the creativity that you brought to that design. I love the thought of go to that circle, go to this circle, go to that line. How fun to be able to add that into creative lessons. So thank you. And as a reminder, feel free to drop questions into the question box as they come up, and then we will save them for the end of the presentations. So next up, another treat is to hear from Carrie Wilhelme with the City of Tacoma. So Kerri is the Senior Transportation Planner for the City of Tacoma with over 10 years of experience in planning, policy development, and community engagement. She was also a public school teacher for 5 years and named District Teacher of the Year, woo, in large part due to her focus on building relationships and passion for advocating for her students. I believe it, Kerri. Now, back in the public sector, in the Public Works Department, she continues to advocate for youth and their right to be able to walk and roll in their neighborhoods safely through Tacoma's well-regarded Safe Routes to School program, which she helped create from inception. Noticing all the underutilized school and community center parking lots due to the pandemic, last fall, Kerri partnered with the Tacoma School District and Metro Parks to paint temporary traffic gardens and coordinated programming during the day as a small way to bring children joy during uncertain times. Thank you so much, Kerri, for presenting, and take it away.
Thank you so much. And Kaylin, thank you for helping me with my slides. I do appreciate that. So as Kaylin said, my name is Carrie Wilhelme and I work for the City of Tacoma in the Public Works Department, and I oversee the Safe Routes to School program. You just heard about, how if you have money and funding and space, how you can make this amazing traffic garden. We're going to swing it the other way, and I'm going to show you how, with a little bit of spray paint and a nice property owner, you can also make a traffic garden. So for some background, I had a Washington Traffic Safety Commission grant that one of the milestones was to do bike camps. And my bike camp was supposed to occur in the fall, and as we all remember, everything was really shut down. Back then, schools weren't coming back anytime soon, community centers were closed, and so a bike camp was not going to be possible. Instead of kind of giving up on that milestone, just thinking about how much kids had lost anyways through the pandemic, I wanted to get creative. And I was fortunate that the Traffic Commission was open to the creativity. And I just want to put that out there if anybody applies for a Traffic Commission grant. I'm not sure this is always something that could be funded. There's a lot of restrictions with the funding, but definitely they're open to it. So just reach out to them if you're thinking of applying for the grant to use it for the traffic gardens. But they were open for it, that I could use it for the basic supplies to make a traffic garden. So next slide, Kaylin. I'm going to just go through the steps I did, but they really transfer to anyone who is a teacher or a community member that maybe wants to make their own traffic garden. So step one is you have to identify the location of where you would put it. So I work for the city government, and with that comes kind of weirdness, right? There's these liabilities and barriers that if the government official comes and says, I want to use your property, it can be a little weird. As a community member, you'll probably have a little bit more flexibility that the person might be like, oh, yes, we'd love to support you. So I went to my community partners. So I reached out to Metro Parks and the Tacoma School District and kind of looked at their properties to see what I could work with. I had the other thing that I wanted to figure out a way to have programming with these traffic gardens, given I was going to do bike camps. And so I just wanted to, bring the kids and work with them as well. So that's also what I did, why I worked with Metro Parks and the Tacoma School District. When I was looking at locations, it's just you're looking for, asphalt lots. I mean, as you're walking around your town or your community neighborhood, I'm sure you're noticing all this asphalt that really is underutilized. Community centers, churches, and schools are great places to start. So for me, I went to an underutilized parking lot, and you'll see it's small, and I still made it work out at a community center owned by Metro Parks, and then a middle school playground owned by the Tacoma School District. So when you're thinking of schools for a location, don't just go elementary. High schools and middle schools have a lot of asphalt that you could work with that is available after school and on the weekends. So that was my first thing, is I kind of identified potential areas of where I could put a traffic garden in. Next slide. Then you need to get permission, and you really should get permission. And you would talk to the property owner. So if you're doing it through a park, you'd reach out to the park district or the city, I guess, if it's run by the park, or the school district. So I reached out to both of them and got permission to put this in. Once I had the permission to go on the property, that was probably like the biggest win. Once the property owner's like, yes, I support this and I will be fine with any liability coming along with it, then I reached out to the building owner so they knew what was happening and they were comfortable with it as well. In this case, it was the manager who ran the community center and then the principal of the school, and they bought off right away. They loved the idea. Then you really should talk to the maintenance person, and just out of respect, right? You're coming in, you're painting the property, you want them to know that you will take care of it, and then just, you know, it's a respect issue. And so I did do that. I talked to the head of maintenance on both of them. For the school district, it was important. I found out that I also had to get permission from the union. So that's just something to think about. For the Tacoma School District, the union oversees all the painting. So I also did need to meet with their union representative to get their permission, and then they told me what paint that they wanted me to use, that they were comfortable with. So once I checked all those boxes and met with all those people, everybody was pretty hands-off, and they're like, have fun, go for it. We're so happy you're doing something for children. Next slide. So here are the supplies that I bought. The union asked me to use a temporary spray chalk paint. So that is what I use. So I was kind of a little bit limited, but I mean, I would use a temporary paint, but I use a temporary spray chalk paint. That picture is exactly the brand I used, and it was good. I'd recommend it. It's not the longest lasting, but it does the job. A case of it, I could only find it by the case, runs $65 a case for 12 of them. And one basic kind of average size traffic garden, you'll see I have the number of cans I used. I bought too much red. You don't need a lot of red, but I needed about 3 cans of red. I used about 6 cans of white and 4 cans of yellow. So that's, you need your spray chalk. The next thing you'll need is a marking wand, and you can get that at any home store like Home Depot or Lowe's or your local store. And those run about $25. I only bought one. I kind of wish I would have spent the money and bought 2 just for time, but you can get by with just one. Some chalk to mark up your design, a tape measure. Usually people have one around, or you could borrow one, but if you have to buy it, relatively cheap. So that's like the bare minimum that you need. And really you could probably get by less, but if you want it to kind of look decent, that's what you need. The things that are really nice to have, but not necessary, are Discover Traffic Gardens. They presented at the last webinar earlier in the month, and that recording will be available on the Washington State Across the School Network website pretty soon, but they also have a website, trafficgardens.com. She sells these wonderful kits for you to help make a traffic garden. And I do recommend the guide. If you're not a traffic engineer, you don't have a connection to a traffic engineer, it's really nice to get the guide, and I'll go into that a little bit more. She also sells stencils, so you can buy stencils there. And then the one I'll get into, the rotary hammer, nails, and string. So we're going gorilla on this. And don't buy that, just borrow that from somebody if you don't have one. So these are the supplies that I worked with to make my traffic gardens. Next slide. So the next step is to do the design. And again, this is where that Discover Traffic Gardens guide was really nice, because I just went out to the parking lot or the playground. I looked at the shape and the amount of space I have to work with. I flipped through her book and I said, I think this will work. And she has it all measured out of how wide you should have it, what the radius should be. It was great. So she kind of did the work for us. And so we flipped through and took the chalk and started marking out what we wanted to do on the playground. Just generally, like, what is the traffic flow gonna be? I wanted to have more crosswalks than less crosswalks. And so then where are my crosswalks gonna be? Meaning, how am I gonna get, where are they gonna stop? So I just marked it out with chalk. This is where the rotary hammer was amazing. And my help, it was me, my father and my son. We did this over a weekend. And my father works in construction, and he happened to have the rotary hammer with him. And it was just his brain started churning of what he would do. And he brought it out, and it was great because when it had a straight line where we needed, he just put the nail in, not too far, it's okay, tied the string, and then took it all the way to the next spot we wanted to do, took the rotary hammer, put the nail in, tied the string, and so then we had a completely straight line. That was great for marking it out. And then I didn't have to be down on chalk. My lines were so straight. So it was a huge help. So it's something that if you know someone or has one around, I do highly recommend it. So then we just marked out what we wanted. Next slide. So after you mark it out with chalk, you take your marking wand, you take your spray paint, and you start painting. So you do the outside of what you want the street lines to be, and then you fill it in with the rest with your yellow dashed lines, your crosswalks, and you'll see I had my son with me. He's 12 years old. He loved it. He had the best time helping us out. But you can kind of see where it'd be nice to have 2 marking wands because then we could have painted at the same time. But that part's actually, it's like the layout that takes time where you have to think it through. But once you have it laid out, the painting goes by quite quickly. All told, from design to paint to being completely done, it was 3 hours of traffic garden for us, for the 3 of us working together to do it. That's how long it took us. Next slide. So here's kind of before. I used that blade. I had that parking lot, and then you'll see we squeezed it in. What it looked like after. This was my smaller one. No space too small. You can make it work out. And then here is the playground, and we use those existing lines. I don't know if it was 4 square. This is middle school, what it was, but I mean, if you look at it now, you're like, that's perfect. You got a roundabout. You already have all the lines there. That was fantastic. So that one actually went a little bit more quickly, but it was a lot larger. And then that was the after result for us. Next slide. So the next thing I did, if I have any teachers on here or anybody who runs a community center, is I wanted to activate the space. So the locations I chose were the centers of learning camps that are essential workers. If they needed a place for their children to go to school, Metro Parks had partnered with the school district and had these learning camps. Additionally, one of the ones at the community center was the location that students experiencing homelessness went during the day, so they had a safe place with internet connection to do schooling. So what I did is, again, because I had the grant funding, I bought 10 scooters because I don't have space to store bikes. Bought 10 scooters, and I worked with the kids for an hour a day out on the traffic garden. So they each got a helmet. We decorated them with stickers. They loved that. That was the best thing you could do. And then we went out and we rode scooters in the traffic garden. I worked with kindergarten through 5th grade in phases, and I will say the absolute sweet spot was kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. Their imaginations just took over. They loved it. They would take turns where some would be pedestrians and some would be the scooter riders, as you'll see, and they were so cute. They just naturally would wave to each other and make the eye contact. I had the chalk available so that they could build in the city if they didn't feel like scootering at the time. And a kid made a scooter share, so he made parking so that if a kid was done riding his scooter, he could park it, or he or she or they could park it in the parking spot, and then a kid would know it's available to ride. So it just, traffic gardens are great because it just lets kids use their imagination, essentially. My 4th and 5th graders, they really liked it. Novelty did start to wear off, where they just wanted to ride. They just wanted to get but they did really like it at first, but after that, they didn't want necessarily the boundaries and they just wanted to ride around. Next slide. So some considerations is, of course, the time of year and weather. So you need it to be dry. Right now it's perfect. This is why we're doing the webinar. I had to do this in the fall. So I pulled this all off November 1st. It was the day after Halloween. But man, I wish I would have done it over the summertime. It was kind of killing me that it was the bad weather was creeping in. So you need the cement to be dry. the day before, you need to be dry the day that you're doing it, and you need a day next day for it to be dry. So you kind of need to time it that you have at least 3 days of no rain in order for that temporary spray chalk to stick. You have to think about how the space is currently being used. So the community center parking lot, the community center was closed. So it was only staff that would park there, and I had them not park there during the time. But now I don't know if it'd work as well with community centers opening up. So I'd think about their hours, like when is this space going to be available to the public? That's why schools are great, because most schools are open at the end of the day or on the weekends. But you just have to think about it. When is church in attendance? Like, is there going to be an opportunity for people to actually be able to use it? Or are there always cars kind of there? Or is it closed off to the public? And then accessibility to the surrounding neighborhood. Like, there was a great parking lot that in another community center, but I didn't really see a way to get there besides driving with. So you want to have it be like a neighborhood feature where someone could go. I also wanted it to be in a spot not next to a park, like from that equity lens, a safe place to ride a bike that maybe a child wouldn't have one, or other things I was thinking about. And then finally, don't overthink it. The kids are just going to love it. We did screw up on one of them. An engineer maybe caught it right away. Kids don't care. If your lines aren't straight, kids don't care. Like, they just love the fact that they have an opportunity to use their imagination, be outside, and ride their bikes or scooters. And that's all that matters. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Kerri. That's phenomenal. I love that you were able to pull in Fanula Quinn's Discover Traffic Gardens information from our last webinar, and that it was just 3 hours per traffic garden. That blows my mind. So incredible work, and thank you so much for sharing with us. Next, I would like to introduce Carrie Wilson and Karen Steen. Carrie Wilson coordinates Intercity Transit's Walk and Roll program in Thurston County. The program partners with schools, cities, and local organizations to educate and encourage youth to walk, bike, and ride transit for transportation. And Karen Steen is an elementary PE specialist at Mount View Elementary. She's taught in North Thurston School District for 30 years. Thank you so much, Karen. Her program emphasizes 100% participation, fun, and good sportsmanship, and hopefully the kids leave the gym sweating and smiling. Take it away, Karen.
Thank you. Carrie's going to start off first for our slides. There she is. Hi, Kerri.
Can you see our slides?
We sure can.
All right, great. Yeah, so we are actually going to share about 2 different projects that are happening in Thurston County. But first, I wanted to give a shout out to Safe Kids Thurston County. Both of these projects are partnerships that are being led by Safe Kids, but unfortunately our Safe Kids partner was not able to attend the webinar tonight. So the first project I will share is about a pop-up traffic garden event that we have planned for this summer. Originally, this event was supposed to be a large community bike rodeo, but because of COVID, we reimagined the event. And this project is a partnership between Safe Kids, Target Zero, Walk and Roll, and the Olympia Police Department, as well as their Parks and Rec department, and it was funded by the Traumatic Brain Injury Council. So we're holding the event at 2 different elementary school sites in the Olympia School District, and to kick off the events, we will hold 2 helmet distributions at those school sites before installing the traffic gardens. So we will use spray chalk just like Kerri did, and we are also using the same traffic garden guide from trafficgardens.com, from Discover Traffic Gardens. This is our first time doing it, and so we're really excited to have that very useful resource. So each of these gardens will be advertised and made available to the community and on-site child care centers and day camps for a week. And each of the sites will have a sign with instructions of how to use the garden and a link to an online activity page, which can be filled out and then sent in for a prize. We would mail prizes to participants, and this will give us a way to estimate the number of kids who use the garden. And it also will encourage them, hopefully, to practice some specific bicycle safety skills while using the garden. There is some on-site staff who are going to keep an eye on the gardens for us and let us know if we need to go in and re-chalk during the week. And this whole project, all of the traffic garden tools, cost us about $500, and many of those supplies we'll be using for future projects as well. So the second project that we are working on is a permanent traffic garden at Mountain View Elementary School, which is located in Lacey, and it is part of the North Thurston Public School District. So this project is also a partnership with Safe Kids Thurston County, Intercity Transit's Walk and Roll program, and Mountain View. We all applied for a grant from State Farm for $9,000 to install the permanent traffic garden. So in addition to our partners, we also formed a team that included the school's assistant principal, the school district's facility manager. We have an amazing traffic engineer who is volunteering all of his time. We had 2 high school students who are working with their teacher to put the project into CAD. We have involved the playground staff, and then of course Karen, who is the PE specialist at Mountain View, who will be talking in a few minutes. And then some tips that we learned when forming our team is an engineer is absolutely necessary, and we are extremely lucky that we have Chris, who has volunteered his time to help us. Honestly, without Chris, we would be in a lot of trouble. So if possible, we do recommend including some funds in your budget to pay an engineer. Also, having a supportive and flexible property owner was really important for us. We're really lucky to work with Mountain View. We already had a really good relationship with them. And then the North Thurston School District has been great to work with as well. Their facilities manager has been awesome, and he is actually going to use their equipment and their staff time to paint all the lines for the garden. So the first thing we did was we did a site survey of the area led by our engineer. Our garden is 100 by 100, and we went out and identified obstacles like storm drains and slopes, and located the gates and things that we need to include in the design. Then Karen helped us engage the 5th grade students at Mountain View to help us design the garden. And on the left is the winning student design that inspired the final traffic garden. In the middle is a photo with some added flourishes, some artistic pieces. And then on the right is the final CAD drawing that the high school students helped us put together. So then we prepared the pavement. First, we had an Eagle Scout power wash the area. You can see there was some paint already on the ground. And then we had it professionally sealed. This was the most expensive part of our project at $6,000, but we felt that it was necessary. There is a small section, the one that's circled in blue there, that we weren't able to seal, and we had an Eagle Scout paint it black for us. And this took a lot more paint and a lot more time than we expected. Pavement is very porous, and so we do highly recommend getting it professionally sealed before painting your traffic garden. So then we laid out the design with chalk, and once again, our traffic engineer helped us do this. We used some string and a piece of wood. We also used, I think it's called a chalk line, to help us draw the lines to get a straight line where you snap the string. And then you can see here what it looked like once we drew all of the lines in chalk. And then we painted. So we had volunteers come out and paint all of the background space light green. And our next steps, which got a little delayed because of this rainy week, we will have the school district facility staff go out and paint all the lines. And then we have Karen and another artistic teacher from the school who will be adding some artistic features to the garden and stenciling the signs, stop signs, and things like that. All right, so we're hoping to have the garden complete by next week. But I'm going to hand it over to you, Karen, to share more about how the garden will be used.
Great, thanks, Kerri. So at Mountain View, we had applied for a grant through OSPI, and on this slide here, you'll find the link. And we received a grant, I think it was $30,000, and that bought us a fleet of bikes and a trailer to store them all in. So I chose 3 different sizes of bikes so that they would fit my 4th and 5th graders. And then you can see that there's a picture there of the trailer where they all hang up and they're all stored in that trailer. And that trailer is really important because we share those bikes with other schools. So you can transport the trailer to other schools, and it can be transported to our district bus barn where it is stored like during the summertime. I always start off my unit in the gym, and it's really a bike safety unit. So we really want to teach how to properly fit your helmet and really how to signal and be safe on your bike. We encourage the kids to bring their own helmets so that we can properly fit their helmet. But if they don't have helmets, then we have enough for everybody. And if you're borrowing my helmet, then we do use coffee filters as a barrier to help keep the helmets clean. And it does take a lot of volunteers for this program. I mean, I could do it by myself, but the more volunteers you have, I think the more successful your program can be. It's kind of hard to see, but I think there's at least 4 adults down in that bottom picture that are standing around there helping to fit helmets on kids. And I work at a Title I school, and so my kids, many of them have never ridden a bike before. It's really sad. And so by having more volunteers, I can really group the kids by ability levels and divide them up and have a volunteer with each group. So that works really great. So the next slide, please, Kerri. Thanks. So we also go outside, and I have a big dirt field that works really great to ride in. And the kids, by the end of my 5-day unit, they must pass a skills test to go on a field trip to our local park. So we take them on the road. So the skills test consists of being able to signal to the right and to the left for 3 seconds with control, and to signal for stopping, and then use their hand brakes, which many of the kids have never used hand brakes before, and not drag their toes to stop on a line. So if they can do that, then they pass the test and we take them to the park. You can see the bottom circle there. I take my kids and I color code them with pennies, jerseys, and I have a volunteer at the front and the back of the line, and I give them safety vests, and then we go as small groups to the park. And it's a really great thing because the volunteers can make sure that they're safe and that they're using the proper signaling and everything that we learned on campus to take it to the park. I've had a couple kids with special needs. We've had one student who got to go to the park with us on a tandem, which was really amazing for that student. And then I also purchased a big, huge trike that I use for some students. They don't take that to the park, but they're able to participate in our bike unit on this trike. And it's awesome to see those smiles of those kids. So our next slide here, it really does take a village, I believe, for this program to be successful. Intercity Transit and Safe Kids have been with me from day one, and here they're still with me today. here's Kerri today. So pretty much anything I have needed, I just reach out to them and they have made it happen. I mean, if I need volunteers that come help teach my program or be chaperones to the park, they've donated helmets for my children. They helped me get some balance bikes because we kept taking pedals on and off for balance bikes. So we got just some specific balance bikes, which is great. Prizes, and just it goes on and on, all the support that they've been. My local bike store, Joyride Bike, has been amazing about doing tune-ups for kids for free, and they donate prizes also for our bike to school days. I am on a racing team, and so my racing team also comes and helps maintains the fleet of bikes. And that is really important. That needs to be done. And that's really not the fun part of biking, but it's an important part of biking. So it is, I would say, a lot of work, but it is the most rewarding unit or lessons I have ever taught in 30 years. I've had kids who are just in absolute tears and anxieties before our unit starts, and by the end of our unit, I mean, they're riding a bike. They weren't going to the park with us yet, but they're on their way there. And to be able to give a child that lifetime skill and hopefully help them learn how to be safe on their bike, it's just so rewarding. So it's awesome. All right, we have 2 more slides. So we, as you saw, Kerri talked about our traffic garden, which is so amazing and it's exciting. I can't wait for us to be done with that and to use it. It's really going to add a great next stage to our unit that we already have. So it's going to help teach the kids in a realistic, safe place what we've been learning, but before taking them on the road. Besides that, we do a walking school bus, and so this will help teach our pedestrian safety for that. And also, I have already seen kids after school playing with it with skateboards and scooters. So it's already become a community area, which that's exactly what we wanted it to be. And now what our next goal is, which I'm so excited for this, is we are getting a fleet of balance bikes through a program called All Kids Bike. And their mission is to get every child in America to ride a bike in kindergarten. So I will now be starting, once we get those bikes, to add kindergarten and first grade to our bike unit so that they can use these balance bikes. And the beauty of that will be then when they come back and ride again in 4th grade, and for kids who have never had an opportunity to ride a bike before, hopefully they'll have less anxieties and they'll be more excited to do our bike unit in 4th and 5th grade. So let's see, is the link on there too. Yeah, All Kids Bike is right there too, if you're interested in that grant. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen and Kerri, for sharing your experiences, and I can't wait to hear about what comes next with the littles and the traffic garden. So with that, we are getting down to towards the end of our time here. So we only have time for about 1 question. But before we do, I was so excited for our speakers and to hear about Washington specific examples of traffic gardens. I forgot to even introduce myself. So my name is Kaylin Henley, and I am with Alta Planning and Design, but I'm also working with Carrie Wilhelme, Carrie Wilson, and Charlotte Claybrook, among others, with the Washington Safe Routes to School Network. And we are reinvigorating this network. We asked that you visit our new website. We're still building it out at washingtonsaferoutes.org. Sign up for our weekly or our monthly newsletter and take our survey to be featured on the map, because our goal is to connect and provide opportunities for Safe Routes to School practitioners, educators, volunteers to connect, share ideas, resources, and advocate for safe routes across the state. So for for this one last question, we only have a few minutes left, and there's a really important question about how any accommodations for special needs students were built into the project designs. And Kerri and Karen, since you spoke to bringing students out on trikes or other adaptive equipment, I'm curious if you are able to speak to that.
Sure, I can. I guess I just kind of did share what we did do with having, like, we got the tandem bikes that a student got to ride on the back of to the park, and then that big trike is what has been the best. Then we also, with my older kids, we still have the balance bikes for them, so we just don't have the pedals on them for them, and they just use their feet. But they're still learning how to be safe on a bike, and they're still participating in everything that we're doing. So it's been really a positive for those children.
Fantastic. Thank you, Karen. Steve and Ed, did you have anything to add in terms of the design of your traffic gardens?
Well, I think the site is accessible. There's an accessible sidewalk ramp up to it. I don't think we made any special accommodations within the design itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you for sharing. I can imagine that, and well, perhaps Kerri, did Fanula Quinn have any insights into how she designed that, perhaps in the playbook that you received?
I think we have the two Kerris, but I don't think so. I think it would just be that the spacing would accommodate perhaps a larger bike. So the lane width, you would maybe just think of that. But outside of that, I don't think there's anything that is discussed in the book.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you all for that background. Yeah, I can imagine lane width, Kerri, as you mentioned, and also turning radius would be really important. So not making it too tight, but knowing that we have to work within the confines of our space to make these really creative projects happen. Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Steve, Ed, Kerri, Karen, and Kerri. Thank you so much for speaking and sharing your experiences implementing these in Washington State. Again, check us out at washingtonsaferoutes.org. And I know there was a couple questions we weren't able to answer, so if you please feel free to email Washington Safe Routes or Washington SRTS at gmail.com, and we can try and connect you to the right speaker for your question. This webinar, as we mentioned before, will be was recorded and will be available in the coming weeks on our website as well. So thank you all for being here, and thank you so much to Charlotte at WashDOT for providing the platform for us to discuss. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.